So we're really interested in getting an update on her initiatives, as well as new ideas that she is bringing to the department and changing the way it conducts business to achieve the efficiencies and the kinds of savings and increased productivity that I know many of our Commonwealth North members are expecting from state government. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the commissioner, or back to Wineta, our czarina of everything Zoom. So back to Wineta, and again, welcome, Commissioner.
All right, we'll go ahead and go, excuse me, I gotta close the window. We'll go directly to Commissioner Tshibaka. You're on screen.
I just had to hit the unmute button. Thanks so much for having me today. It's wonderful to see everybody, and or at least virtually. I think that there are some new faces, so I'll give a little bit of a introduction about my story and my background here in Alaska for those who I didn't get to talk to before. I was born and raised here in Alaska. My parents actually moved up here in the 70s, and they were homeless. They came up to start a new life. I think many people can relate to that. And then that didn't work out well for them. Being homeless in Alaska, they went well into winter and realized that homeless didn't work out so well. So they started working their way up through what we would call the typical American dream ladder, starting out with small jobs. One of my mom's jobs, some of you know well, the legend Tom Fink here in Alaska. And so she was his bookkeeper for a while in one of his businesses. And then when he later ran for elected politics, that was part of our history growing up. I remember when he was running for election, Mom was like, hey, I know him. So my mom ended up being an auditor for what I knew as the oil companies that cycled in and out of the Gold Tower. That was my memory as a kid. And then my dad was an electrician for ATU, which later became ACS. And we lived in various homes around town. I remember the duplex off Muldoon, and then the house out in the valley. And then I mostly grew up down on the south side of town when the hillside was still a bunch of unpaved dirt roads, and before it became what it is now. So my parents then put me into college, and then I got into Harvard Law. So I've got like this little fairy tale story of, you know, from homeless to Harvard is kind of how my family story in Alaska went. I tell you that because I know Alaska to be this land of opportunity where it changed the course of our family destiny. It's only in a nation like ours where a girl can go from growing up off the side of Muldoon to being a leader in state and federal government. So after law school, what happened is I got a job down in DC. The plan was to pay off my law school loans and then move back home. It took longer to pay off law school loans working for the government than I'd hoped. And I ended up having a really successful and interesting career doing federal government oversight, where I learned how to, I guess a way to describe it is be like a bureaucracy whisperer, make the government work and reduce government spending, making it work more effectively and perform better, figuring out how to just make government be better and function effectively, serving government watchdog roles. I ended up working with about 20 federal agencies. One of the reasons I had that opportunity is I was part of the intelligence community after we set up the Director of National Intelligence. I was one of the first members of that organization, and there's 17 federal entities there. So as part of the oversight of that entire mechanism. And then how did I come back home? I was really inspired by Governor Dunleavy when he was running for governor and his vision for Alaska. And I thought, if we're gonna actually make that happen, he's gonna need a team to do it. So I cold emailed him. I didn't know anybody on his team and around him to be able to kind of get a good in, but I just cold emailed him and said, hey, this is what I do. And if you have a need for that skill set, I'd love to come home and help. I was on the phone with him a couple days later and he said, yeah, I'd love that, come home. And so we packed up our 5 kids and sold our house and moved home. And then he positioned me to be the commissioner of the Department of Administration, which is really exciting because I get to use those skill sets of making government work effectively here in the Department of Administration. It has a wide span of authority and responsibility. We do everything from supporting all the other departments in the state with like IT, personnel, accounting, doing all of the back end transactions that support all the departments, if you will. Shared services includes their accounts receivable, payable, managing the debt, doing travel transactions. We do all of that. We also have a lot of forward-facing functions like managing the DMV, managing the public defender, taking care of the Office of Public Advocacy. We do the health plan for the state employees. We cover about 10% of the lives in the state. We manage the retirement plan for the employees as well. So we're covering just public broadcasting. That's one that's interesting to a lot of people as well. That's all in the Department of Administration. So being able to bring a skill set of how do we make government work better is convenient because we can have an impact on a broad spectrum of the state. Hold on for a minute. Sorry about that. Thank you. One of the things that I've found inspirational about the moment that we're in, this challenge that we're in, we talked about this the last time I was with you, is we have an increasing challenge with trying to manage our budget deficit. Right now, we're facing a $2 billion budget deficit. So one of the challenges that's before us, and I know that you all understand this, but trying to explain this to the broader audience is we have two ways of trying to balance that deficit. One situation is, we can come at it from the perspective of we can cut our spending through government management, or we can increase our revenue, right? So there's two ways to build the deficit bridge. There's some ideas on the revenue side. There's, take it from the PFD, charge more to oil companies or businesses. We're considering taxes. Those are all different options. One of the ways that we're trying to do it in the Department of Administration is how can we look for ways to reduce government spending, making our government more effective in its performance, that we can bridge the gap on that side. I think it's important for us to all acknowledge that we can't bridge a 2 billion plus, I think it's going to be plus at this point, deficit simply by cutting government. We're spending about 10 billion in our operating budget, and that's not going to be bridged just by government reduction of waste, fraud, and abuse. But there are things that we can do in modernizing, in streamlining, and simplifying some of our processes that we can make a pretty significant cut into that. We can make a dent. And those are some of the things that we've been focusing on. So I wanted to come back and give you an update on what some of those things are. So last time we were talking about some of the consolidations that we were going to take on. So I wanted to give you an update on those, and I want to stick mostly to a script so I don't go off on my time, because I know we want to spend some time on taking questions. One of the things that we talked about was the procurement consolidation. Before we had the Dunleavy administration, all of our procurement was separated into our 14 different departments. That means the process for acquiring goods and services through contracts was handled by all of our separate departments in the state. We did do statewide consolidated procurement through DOA. So there's some things that we would acquire on a statewide basis. And we did that through the Department of Administration, but we only had about 6 people responsible for that. When Governor Dunleavy came in to office, he said it would be best if we took all of that effort, anything that was related to statewide procurement and wasn't unique to something that was related only to that specific department, and we put it in the Department of Administration. That way we could benefit from standardized processes, standardized rules and systems, bulk purchasing, et cetera. And so we started the process of doing that. He issued that administrative order in February of 2019. We had a challenge before then of no single office in the government having accountability for approximately $840 million that we do in contracting every year. We actually don't know how much we have in contracting every year precisely. We don't have a solid read on that yet because we don't have an office in charge of all of our contracting. We also have about 113 employees across the state who touch contracting in the state, but we don't have one office that's in charge of all those employees or who can oversee what they're doing. Up until now, most of those employees have just managed the contracting functions they do on their own Excel spreadsheet at their desk, and nobody can see what they're doing or how they're spending their money. So what we found is employees were duplicating data entry, costing valuable time. Sometimes we've been paying twice for the same product or service, double paying vendors. We were preventing the state from getting discounts on volume purchases. Another way that I was describing it is we were being victims of vendor vulturing, where the same vendor was selling us the same license to all of our departments when there's only one state of Alaska and we only need one license sold to us. And so they're picking us off like vultures, and we're just excessively spending when we don't need to. Another way of thinking of it is it's like we're cooking government and we think that we're mixing it in a kitchen bowl, but we're actually mixing it in a colander, and our procurement money is bleeding out on the other end, but we can't see it because all of our officers are in separate departments and they don't know that they're spending over here what we're actually spending over here as well. So consolidation was needed so that we could achieve those significant cost savings and just simply have visibility into what we're doing. Fortunately, we were able to do a review. We spent about a year doing a review and assessment of procurement consolidation, what all these officers and departments are doing, what we're spending money on, how we could use and leverage modern procurement practices in order to achieve better cost savings. So we knew what we were getting into and how we could actually achieve a productive consolidation. We've done consolidation badly in the past, and know some of you are familiar with that. We wanted to make sure that when we did do this consolidation, we actually did it well. And so this consolidation is going to provide better consistency and control over our procurement functions. It'll reduce our redundancies in purchasing. We'll achieve cost savings, and we're going to streamline these processes in a way that makes government more efficient. We actually finished the consolidation, actually brought all these employees in on January 10th. So we've just started the actual consolidation process. So where we were once doing procurement more than 14 different ways across these departments, we're now starting to do procurement the same consistent way across the state. We have a centralized procurement team of 64 dedicated Alaskans committed to running smooth, efficient government statewide. They're now all located in the Department of Administration. They're working together to say this is the same standardized operating processes we're going to use for procurement across the state. They're the ones deciding what that same standardized process is going to be. We actually started that process of developing service level agreements, common SOPs, the same forms and standards last fall. So it's not like we're just starting that process now, but now we've merged everybody into that same process. These improvements aren't small. Through that assessment, we found that we're going to save at least $130 million in the next 5 years doing this. I expect that it's going to be more than that, but making sure that through that assessment, we actually were able to catalog, these are the dollars, these are the areas in which we're going to be able to save those savings. So these are the contract areas. This is the method that we will use. And so we know for solid surety that we're going to be able to save that much money doing procurement these ways. So we want to know that the procurement officers are all on the same page. We want to know that they are using the same system. We're upgrading our system for leveraging procurement action so that they're all putting them into the same system and not using their own spreadsheets anymore. And then we also were sure to leave a number of procurement officers who are specialists, and they're, like for example, in DOT, we have construction specialist procurement officers because they're the only ones doing transportation construction. Those have been left over in the procurement team over at DOT. So similarly, we're doing something like that with HR. We have an HR consolidation also underway. In HR, we've had centralized HR, and then we've had federated HR, where the HR officers have been out in the department. We've kind of gone back and forth on this one several times as well. And the win about that has been that we've designed a new HR. I'm going to pull up the data on this one for you too, that we've designed the new HR with HR officers leading the way. And so rather than the Department of Administration saying, this is how HR is going to go, and this is where HR is going to best be led, and then us kind of dictating from on high how HR is going to be. We actually brought in all the HR officers and said, okay, how should HR look going forward, and what would the best HR be? Similarly, this one was brought forward by Governor Dunleavy right after he was in office, and he put out an AO saying, we need to have consolidated HR. We're doing HR multiple different ways. It's inconsistent. We're spending a lot of money and a lot of time duplicating HR. We had sent out with an HR federation about a decade ago, I think we sent out something just over 40 HR people. And then when we started this consolidation, we realized that they'd more than doubled in their agencies. And so it's clear just by the numbers that when you separate and divide out government functions, they obviously expand and cost more. And so when we're bringing them back, we want to be able to do this more efficiently. And then also we had done an assessment, just like with procurement. And we realized not only will we be able to do HR more efficiently, but we will also be able to provide greater level of HR services to our departments. So HR covers, I'm just going to tell you about what they do. They cover services like recruitment, hiring, the performance management. They do collective bargaining for us. They do discipline, they handle our grievances and complaints, HR investigations, our ADA accommodations. They do training and payroll. They monitor our equal employment opportunities. They cover a wide range of HR services for us. And before we had some of it centralized with DOA, maybe 120 employees or so, and then a lot of it decentralized. Like I said, it had been sent out and then doubled in size. And so we didn't have statewide processes. Every department was operating under a different system. We had inconsistencies and complaints about that. We had labor grievances over that. We weren't getting the best candidates to all of our applications. We knew that our recruitment was inconsistent, I think is probably a fair word. And so without that, every department was getting inconsistent service. And that meant departments were doing it differently. In fact, we found through that assessment and what our HR officers identified, over 70 different inefficiencies that HR was experiencing across the departments that we are going to be able to eliminate simply through consolidation, standardization, and automation with this HR transformation. Just by bringing in these HR officers, those 70 inefficiencies will be eliminated. So we'll now have more consistency and control over our HR functions. Those redundancies will be reduced and we'll achieve these time savings. We'll streamline processes and improve government performance. I've been asked, well, do you intend to get rid of all your HR team or like substantially reduce the HR team? And right now the answer is no, because what we found is we are operating at a bare minimum capacity of functioning for HR. One of the analogies that we've used in the Department of Administration after doing the assessment is, it's like we want to be playing Wimbledon, but instead we're just the ball boys running across the tennis court, picking up the tennis balls. And what our departments are expecting is, you know, they're trying to understand, why am I not getting the candidates that are best qualified for these jobs? Well, and it's because we're not able to run ahead and clean up the classifications, or we're not able to actually update position descriptions that, you know, date back 10 years, or we're not able to actually check and see, did the MQs, the minimum qualifications on these jobs, actually fit the position. There's so many services in HR that we're not actually providing because we're just putting out fires. And if we can actually free up bandwidth in our HR officer team to actually provide high quality HR services, that would be a win. And then as we get more and more freedom in HR, we could actually become not just a place to work or the largest place to work, we could become one of the best places to work in the state of Alaska, and that would be really fantastic. So we're looking at improving government and making, if we can make our HR team fantastic, that would allow us to hire high quality and high caliber people throughout the state. So then we potentially wouldn't need more people to do the same job. We would have best people doing jobs, and that would allow us to maybe get our alignment and shrink our operations in other areas. So I think a high performing HR means success throughout the state. Do you want me to pause and see if there's any questions on that before I talk about all of the IT transformations that we've done to digitize and automate?
Why don't you just go ahead and finish your prepared remarks and we'll do questions at the end.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, so we've undertaken a significant amount of IT modernizations and operations in order to bring us into a working future, if you will, or an IT future. A lot of those we were able to do last year as a result of COVID. Some of them had been planned into a working plan, like a long-term working plan for DOA, but the emergency of COVID forced us to really expedite them. So, for example, last year in April, Governor Dunleavy came to us and said, we really needed to develop a pandemic plan in order to ensure worker safety and then maintain continuity of government operations, make sure the government doesn't shut down during the pandemic. And so to do that, we developed what we call the Pandemic Preparedness Plan. It's the PPP for Alaska, not to be confused with the PPP that is all the money handed out by the federal government. So what we had to do here is develop an IT infrastructure that allowed a large amount of the state of Alaska government to telework. Because what we wanted to do is make sure that we didn't have to have all of our employees coming into government buildings where they could be exposed to COVID. We also wanted to do what we could to make sure we minimize the amount of need for Alaskans to come into government buildings as well for the same reason. So we needed to ensure worker safety and do what we could to assure Alaskan safety. So the first part of this was to do an assessment to figure out what could be digitized, what services could be digitized, and what back-end automation or manual things are we doing that could be automated, so we could actually do these things from home, so we could keep the government working. Before COVID, we had about less than 1% of our workforce working on telework. It was about 120 people. We rapidly shifted, and in about 2 to 3 weeks had over 40% of our workforce teleworking. So this is how we do it. We changed our policies and our personnel system. First, we had to say that before, people had to move to where our jobs were. We made people move to Juneau or Anchorage or Fairbanks. And now with telework, we have a policy where you can work anywhere in locations throughout Alaska. So now we're opening up jobs where you can be recruited in any place in Alaska. Like as an example, one of my directors now lives in Klawock, Alaska, and he teleworks from there. And so we're opening up opportunities for people to be hired in places we've never been recruiting or hiring before. We changed our personnel policies also so that before we had an emphasis more on things like how many hours people were working, and now we're measuring our workers primarily on what they accomplish. So now we're seeing that government employees are actually accomplishing more during a typical workday. We were doing things before like making people travel for training and recruiting and onboarding. And we were really limited then on, that was sucking up a lot of our budget, and it was limiting how many people we could do things for. Well, now we're doing training and recruiting and onboarding. All of those things are online or digitized. And that was a huge IT lift for us as well. We were doing a lot of paper timesheets. We were doing a lot of paper on performance evaluations. I mean, all of that was on paper. We were doing all of our paper on documents for signing. Everything was done by hand. We had everything to have to be signed. Now we've digitized about 30% of our timesheets. We've moved everything over to DocuSign. I wish that we'd done that, about 2 decades earlier, along with the rest of America, but it's huge that we've done that because now we can sign all of our documents electronically. We've put all of our performance evaluations now have the ability to be done electronically. So moving all of that to electronic saves us in storage, it saves us in time, it saves us in paper printing. It allows all of our employees to telework so they don't have to be exposed to the potential of COVID or have to have a lot of people in buildings where we are operating a lot of just transactional costs related to that. The other things that we're doing electronically is conferences. So before we did all of our conferences in conference rooms, now we're doing everything on MS Teams. We were doing a lot of our IT security was not as robust because it didn't have to be. So now we've invested a lot in VPNs. We've increased that 10 times. We put a lot of investments into a whole new cybersecurity infrastructure, including a rapid migration to the cloud. We had incrementally started that when I'd last talked to you. Well, now we've rapidly accelerated that because going to the cloud is great IT security for us when we have so many new entries and vulnerabilities to our network when we're teleworking so much. Another thing we did when we have so many people teleworking is making sure, this is also for IT security, that we've deployed state issued laptops to people who are teleworking like myself, so that we're not wiring in through our personal laptops, which are significantly less secure. So we've deployed over 4,300 laptops to our state working personnel. We've got about 6,000 personnel who are teleworking right now. Another challenge that we ran into is we have some employees who have state issued cell phones, but we have many employees who are teleworking or who could telework who don't, or who simply just don't get good cell phone service. So we've deployed a new technology called soft phones, which are digital phones that are tied to your internet account, and they have the ability to leverage the actual digital platform of the state's IT security in order to get your desk phone at home. And so that's a new technology that we've been able to use. We also deployed a service management system that we're calling Alaska Now, and this has the ability for us to automate just at the outset 160 what were before manual processes. We now have turned into automatic processes, and as we bring more departments in, we'll just be able to automate many, many more. So this is a massive change in business style for us that we'll be able to accelerate quickly and also be able to save a bunch of time. With that, we're also bringing on robotic process automation, which we call RPAs. We're hoping to get the funding for this very soon. We'll be able to introduce RPAs into timesheets, and that'll speed up the automation of the rest of the 70%, where we were just looking at a demo of this. I'm very excited, as were all of the timesheet processors. From the time an employee says, I'm ready to enter my time, to the time the paycheck is issued is just 3 minutes, no errors, which was just like, I mean, that'll revolutionize how government works. And it's all automated, all electronic, and there's no going back and forth to the email to the supervisor, the email correction back to the employee, the email over to payroll, the audit verification. There's about 7 people who touch a pay sheet right now, and the process takes so much time. And this one was employee goes, you know, I'm ready to do this, and then the robot takes over, 3 minutes start to stop. So all of that's being made possible through some of our automated technology that we're doing. Speaking of the stuff that you can be excited about, we are very mindful of the fact that when you interact with the government, it feels like I'm walking into a building, like maybe one of my buildings, maybe called DMV, and then you wait and wait and wait, but we all hate that. And so what we've really pushed out is lots of options to our customer forward facing agencies like DMV, where you can phone in and make an appointment, you get your time, you show up, and you're seen right away. And we just eliminate the wait. You know what you can anticipate and predict. You get, like with a DMV, if you don't know this, I'll give you this insider tip. You actually only have 5 reasons that you ever have to actually go into a DMV office. And none of you actually have 5 full reasons. All of you on that list of 5 probably only have 2 reasons. Everything else that you need done at the DMV, you can do online or through the mail. You don't actually ever have to go to a DMV office except for those 5 reasons. And we're working to do that with all of our customer agencies, all of our departments, is really minimize the amount of time Alaskans have to go to an office and wait and wait and wait, because that's the misery of government. So those are some of the things that we're pushing out digitally through the government and trying to just make everything better for everybody. And I guess I'll take questions, because then maybe we'll see what comes up through that. I know that there are lots of rabbit trails I could go on, but we'll probably lose more interest if I just keep talking.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We do have a number of questions, and I'll try and frame them. There's one of the things that's great to hear is improvement of internal services so that government operates more efficiently internally. But there's a whole suite of questions that are focused on then how do you pivot towards the customer facing aspect. You mentioned some of that with DMV, but I'll just try and run through some of the services. For example, the inability to have secure email with state agencies, the continuing requirement for wet signatures on various forms and government documents, other kinds of permits that continue to require individuals and businesses to interact in what I'll just say is a late 19th century way with state government. So can you talk to how the state government can make advances in those areas to make those customer facing services more efficient across all agencies?
Yes, and Wineta, I want to make sure to answer all those questions. So I think I have them all in my head, but if I forget as I'm answering, let's go through them all.
Okay.
I'll start with the secure email. That is a high priority. We've been working on that project for 2 years now, and we have we're in the testing phase and the working through the what we would call the plan of action and milestone phase to make sure that we go through and are testing for deployment, et cetera. We had started that project with let's just get HES up and running so that we can do secure and health email encrypted and stuff. What we ran into when we were ready to deploy it is once we started sending emails from HES to other departments, it would break the system with other departments because their capability wasn't up and running. And so then we had to lift the entire government up, which is why it's taking so long. But we actually are ready to go with that. It's just a matter of we have to lift up these computers and then lift up this email system. And so that one is almost ready to go and be deployed. So that one, you're absolutely right to identify that that's an issue and concern. And we're 2 years down the road of that project and working hand in glove with all of the other departments. And we're in the process of consolidating IT right now. One of the things that takes is a close working relationship with all the IT officers in the state to level up the entire IT framework. And I'm happy to report that that's happening. And I get a monthly readout on each of, on the status of that project. And I just had that this week. The next one is, so how do we do this across the state? It's great that you guys are doing all of that in admin, but the fact is that we have inconsistent experiences, absolutely. What we found, so I told you in that pandemic plan, we went around and we assessed where are we at in the whole state? What can be digitized and automated in order to make this safe for everybody? We found 128 functions that can be digitized and automated across the government in order to make sure that we have the minimum need for Alaskans to come to government and minimum need for workers to come into government offices. We phased those out into what we called phases of the pandemic plan. So phase 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We only had time and money in the pandemic plan to get to phases 2 and 3. Phase 2 was the part I talked about where we modernized the entire personnel system so that we could hire teleworkers and we could actually measure them by what they were performing rather than by whether they clocked in or out, because we can't see them in buildings. We need to measure teleworkers by what they're doing because we can't see them coming in and coming out. So we had to change our entire personnel system to fit a telework structure. Level 3 was the stuff I told you about with IT. Like we need to automate, and we need to increase our IT security. We need to get laptops out. We need to say, we can do conferences remotely. We can do IT security. We can digitize performance evaluations and all this. We had to digitize all the stuff we're doing in DOA. What you're talking about, Wineta, is exactly what phases 4, 5, and 6 are. It was phase 4 was short term. What can we do really quickly to modernize and automate and digitize what all the other departments are doing? Phase 5 was midterm. What can we do to automate and digitize what the other departments are doing? And phase 6 was long term. And what we said was, originally under coronavirus, everything had to be done by December 30th. And we couldn't get to all those things by December 30th. So we said, if we get more money and we get more time, these are the next projects up, and we already have project plans for them. We know exactly what we need to do. There's some of the things you're thinking. How fast can we get these permits out? Why are we doing wet signatures for some of these things when you could just do them from your smartphone, right? Like you could do this from Talkeetna. You could do this on a river. You could do this while fishing on the river up in wherever you want to be up in the interior. We don't need you to come into fishing game to do this, right? Like, why am I carrying around my paper fishing log while I'm on the Kenai with my pen going, I just caught one. This is really silly. You could do this on your phone. We can absolutely digitize most of this. We just need the money to do it. So we have those 128 projects logged. It's just a matter of getting the budget for it and working with those partner departments to say, are you ready for us to digitize and automate this? our OIT shop is ready to go. And we now have, where we didn't before, we now have the caliber of IT department that can actually do this, especially once we're consolidated, which is happening this year. Was there one other question that was on your list, Wineta, that I needed to answer?
I think you captured it, mostly secure email, wet signatures, and permits. Sort of a catch-all question for you, Commissioner. Being a change agent is not an easy thing within any organization, but with a large organization that has so many locations and distributed services over such a vast geography, being a change agent is I would say doubly or maybe quadruply difficult. But can you describe, what's the friction with the change aspect? Is it something that's being embraced, or how are you gaining endorsement or embracing of these kinds of changes across state government?
I think that's a great question. And I think I've encountered that friction since I was 3 years old. Change is always hard, and it's hard for everybody. And we can expect that in anything that we do. The way that we've approached this, or I think it's honest to say the greatest amount of friction that we've had came last year when all of these changes were pre-planned and everyone was on board. Everyone in the state, so my fellow commissioners, the ASDs, the departments, we all can feel this isn't working and something needs to change. And so when the pain on the outside hurts more than the pain on the inside, they're willing to undergo change, right? But then we started undertaking the consolidations and the IT changes and everything, the ball's already rolling, and then the pandemic comes. And then none of us had the emotional bandwidth, the resource bandwidth, the personnel bandwidth to do all this change at the same time. And all of us felt like this is too much and too hard and something needs to give. And we didn't have any give to give. All of us felt that way, if we're going to be honest, and I think we can be. What worked and what helped is we said, we're not doing this to you. In the past, DOA has always done this to the departments. We've always come in and been a little bit like the Borg. If anyone's seen Star Trek, and if you haven't, I'll explain it to you. Star Trek, the Star Trek characters are always kind of out in outer space, being amicable and trying to bring everyone together. And their biggest nemesis is this other group called the Borg, which assimilates everybody into them, into the collective. And resistance is futile. And we will take you over and make you just like us, and you can't do anything about it. And it's kind of how DOA is operated. It's like they will just send fiats from on high and a memo from the commissioners like, dun, dun, dun. And we didn't do that this time. We said, look, this is best for all of us. And the way we brought them along was different this time than other times. We actually set up a governance structure in DOA. Before, DOA always made the decisions, always imposed them on the other departments, said our way or the highway, Borg style. This time we said, okay, this is best for all of us. HR officers, you design the transition. Procurement officers, you tell us what's going to work. And also, we're going to set up a governance structure in DOA because we mean it long-term. There's a governance committee of commissioners who make the decisions about all these. We have what we call the shared, not just shared services, but the shared divisions that make the decisions about the other departments. Then we have the joint divisions that are kind of, they provide back-end service like risk management. Nobody cares what risk management's doing. It's not affecting their bottom line. Then we have the public-facing divisions. My other departments aren't caring about what public defender is doing. They very much care about what HR is doing. So now they have a decision-making authority in what HR is doing. And then we have advisory committees under them. So I have an HR advisory committee, an IT advisory committee, a procurement advisory committee. You get the idea. Those advisory committees are staffed with a composite of leaders from the other departments. And they're making the decisions about what are we going to automate next, for example. They're making decisions, for example, about the leveling up of the email security platforms. And then they're taking those recommendations to the commissioner committee. So it's not just OIT making all the decisions about the IT email system for all the departments. That's one of the ways that we've been able to move forward together. And that's kind of our theme, that forward together is the theme we're taking with the departments. When they send me back, when a commissioner sends me back a thing saying, I have a real issue with this service level agreement. Service level agreements, Wineta, is another thing that we've done that we've never had before. They can see on paper, this is the standard that you can expect from us. And if you don't get it, you have a right to elevate this to the commissioner committee or a right to elevate this to my commissioner. I'm holding my directors responsible in their performance evaluations for meeting the service level agreement standards. That's their KPIs. We've never done those things before. So when we all hit our stress bandwidth, toxic overload last year, what held everybody together was DOA isn't doing this to you. We're all in this together. And if we don't take care of procurement, if we don't take care of HR, how are you going to get the stuff you need for COVID? How are you going to get the people you need for COVID? Because this isn't working. And that's how we moved forward together. They're making the decisions with and for DOA right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. So having a crisis like the pandemic obviously maybe has helped to accelerate or at least focus attention and perhaps drive some culture change within the state with the need to create some of these changes. Post-pandemic, how do you anticipate maintaining that kind of momentum?
That's exactly right. I've heard this question phrased another less kind way. Well, you've done a great job. What happens when your whole team leaves and everything just reverts back, right? We trust you. We don't trust the next person. That's exactly why we set up the governance structure. Is we said, you know what? I hear these stories where it looks like this, that DOA does something, then it undoes it, then it does it, then it undoes it. And that's part of the reason why the state's in the condition that it's in. We can't have that. These are all good government changes that we've implemented. I've started tallying up how much these changes that we've implemented between going to the cloud, the procurement savings, we've got other things that we've done, like with the health plan, we've saved $21 million just in 1 year. Like when you start adding these up, they're well over $100 million. We're probably pushing $200 million. And then these things are going to accumulate and aggregate. We can't hit reverse on this just because we had another restructure idea. Restructuring is not good for organizations. We need to keep this momentum going. These are good government ideas. Our shared services, they've got their performance metrics rocking. When I started, we were turning around travel reimbursements in 6 to 9 months. What? We're now down to under 3 days. We were charging an exorbitant amount of money, much worse than it was costing any individual agency to do it. We now have dropped that 88%. We need to keep on this trajectory. This is good government. That's why we set up the governance structure, so that the departments go, no, this is how it's supposed to work. This is working well. We're the ones making the decision, so that if another commissioner team comes in, they don't quite understand how this works. That's what happened when we came in. There were the soonest documents available of how this commissioner office worked was like back in 2006. There were no documents on the bookshelf about anything that had happened since then. I was like, well, how does this place operate? So if that were to happen again, the whole governance structure would lead and say, no, this is what's going on. We have real-time knowledge of what's happening here, and we can then inform the leadership team. And we can't really, they're not going to want to restructure or do another consolidation or divide up, because they're getting the services they want. That's the idea. If the departments are if they're holding DOA accountable and they're getting better services than they had before, why would we reverse or do worse government? It's supposed to be, they have a financial incentive to keep DOA running well. And they're making the decisions that are driving that financial incentive. It's actually a private business model in a government setting. That's what we're setting up. I know that you all understand that.
Yeah. We have a whole host of questions about HR functions, and you mentioned the need to, you said 4,300 laptops that you'd had to deploy to give workers telecommute opportunities. Can you say more about how the state is addressing telework in terms of, internet costs, phone, any office supplies, all of those kinds of aspects of working from home? As I sit here in Commonwealth North's temporary world headquarters in my guest bedroom, but a question about how to handle those kinds of costs, and working with individuals to take care of those costs. And then I'm just going to throw in a couple of other questions, HR related. What goals is the administration setting for future collective bargaining agreements? And can you say anything about the cost share between employees and the state with regard to healthcare insurance?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions. So what we set up with, we followed what the federal government does with respect to telework. So we said our option for telework during COVID is this is voluntary, not required, encouraged because of health reasons. And we're not going to pay for desks and furniture, ergonomic standards, et cetera. If you need a computer, tell us. If you need to take home state equipment, we don't want you taking home state equipment because it creates liabilities and problems. However, you can get a department exception to do so. So we do have, we need to be flexible when we suddenly in 2 weeks are doing a pivot, right? You can't just say strong, dark, black and white rules, because we've got to create flexibility for any given office, workforce, et cetera. We over at DOA and the Office of OIT can't see into every single department and every single situation to say, this is the strong rule. We need to allow supervisors, directors, and commissioners to be able to exercise judgment. So we did say, we don't want people running off with printers and shoving them in their cars, and that's not a good idea. However, we do allow a department exception if there's one needed. That's why we pivoted and we plussed up our OIT workforce quickly to say, we're going to deploy rapidly. 4,300 laptops is most of the people who were sent home or who went home on telework. That said, the office supplies part, we were free and said, absolutely, you can take home your office supplies. If you have notebooks, pens, staplers, et cetera, you're absolutely allowed to take those home. You can do that. What we saw happen during COVID is people would come in and out as they needed. People weren't able, for the most part, to just stay home straight for, we're going on almost a year now. People came in and out, they would do a day in the office and come out, et cetera. So they would get the supplies that they needed. Reimbursing for internet, reimbursing for all of that, we didn't do that. However, many people have their government issued cell phones. And so for people who needed internet, we would say, if you need internet and you don't have it, you can get a government issued cell phone and you can hotspot through your cell phone. And that worked for most people, and we pay for the cell phone. And so that was the solution that we used there. This is in line with what the federal government does for telework. If people needed more than that, then we would say, if you need more than that, you're probably a candidate who needs to just come to the office and have office support. Because we did not budget and don't have a budget to essentially expand to 6,000 new office locations. That's not what we're doing here. This is an option, and it's a flexible option for workers. Otherwise, we need to bring you into the office and then prepare for worker safety, COVID precautions at the office. Another question that I get on this, and I think I'm going to answer because even though it wasn't asked, I think that people on the phone probably or on the call have it and aren't answering it or aren't asking it. Are we teleworking out of state and outsourcing jobs? This is a huge concern in the state. The answer is we have less than 70 people currently working out of state with telework. We make sure that a commissioner has to approve those requests. Almost always they are, I have to do healthcare out of state. I have a family who's sick out of state. I'm running down to take care of somebody who just passed away. Or can I go out of state to take care of someone or something? Like I've seen, my mom is really sick with COVID, or is those kind of situations. And we decided, you know what, in this time, we need to be really flexible with what's happening around us in this pandemic. We're not going to be heartless managers who say, yeah, it's a worldwide pandemic and your family's suffering. Sorry, you have to tap out all of your leave if you want to go see your family. Or I'm sorry, you can't go work remotely for 3 months when everybody else is working from their living room. You can't work from a living room in the lower 48. That's not okay. We didn't let people get carried away with it. Again, we're under 70 people for a workforce of 6,000 teleworkers. We also are being really clear, you're not allowed to do this long term. We're pulling back on any notion that we're we're outsourcing jobs. We're not doing that. We're not hiring people and saying, yeah, you don't have to be in Alaska. Not at all. And we're making sure we're in talks with the unions right now. They're saying we're not even comfortable with this. We want to pull back on this. And we're starting to message that to employees too. As vaccines are rolling out, as our COVID numbers are reducing, this pandemic is seeming to slow a bit. And we're going to be coming back in on this to say, unless you've got some really, really large reason to need to be teleworking remotely, we're going to need to be using leave to do this, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're having to justify exceptions to rules because we've got so many people teleworking remotely. So I just want to address that, because I know it's been a concern. How many people are out of state, and are we just, tanking our economy as the largest workforce in the state? If we've got 4,000 people now teleworking in Hawaii, that's not what's happening. On to the next question after the one about office supplies, the collective bargaining agreements. We've started our negotiations on that. Our goals on those are always, as a daughter of an IBEW union employee, and we couldn't pay our bills for many months during the 80s, always we need to treat our workers safely, or treat our workers right and treat them well. We also need to be mindful of the financial situation that our state is in. So we just finished, for example, I can't talk about ongoing collective bargaining agreements. That's not right. But we just finished collective bargaining with PSCA, and those terms came out. There's some stuff that's still under negotiation, but the governor offered them a slight increase in their terms, because public safety is still super critical in Alaska. We need to make sure that we maintain the correction officers, and that we are still recruiting and retaining them, and that we don't have a mass exodus and that our state becomes unsafe. What we do going forward with the other unions, so a little bit of it depends on which union and what happened with them under Walker and where they're placed with respect to their wage ratio and the economy. But our goal is always to treat them right, and then also be mindful of just where we are fiscally. We can't be out of line with the fiscal reality. I hope that answers it without, saying stuff I'm not allowed to say. And then was there one other question, Wineta?
Yeah, what is the shared cost, if any, between the state and employees with regard to health insurance?
I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I remember we're not increasing our costs as a state right now. This is part of us working really hard to cut that 21 million in savings out of the plan. We are not increasing the manager costs right now, our state costs, and we just reduced I think the largest percentage. There's different options you can pick in the plan. Most employees pick the standard plan with family, if I'm remembering that right, and we just reduced substantially how much that would cost employees because of all the cost savings we were able to earn. So our goal is to hold flat the cost share for the state and to reduce it for the employees because of the financial situation that we're in for everybody. If I'm remembering correctly, it's like, yeah, I really shouldn't say because I don't remember, but we're holding it the same.
Okay. One last sort of group of questions, I guess. There's a great deal of interest on the part of the audience with what the priorities are for digitizing state services, particularly those that are involved with businesses and the conduct of business to get the economy moving more quickly to improve all of those services. So is it possible that we could share the priorities for digitizing future services at whatever your list is? You mentioned the different tiers, and how will the state continue to approach accelerating the speed of those services to business as we move forward?
So you're saying if we were to start into phase 4, which projects?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you give me a minute, let me pull up that plan, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have them memorized. We did this last July. Let me see how quickly I can get. Okay, I'm looking at a 214-page PowerPoint presentation. And I know that it's in here, but I don't think we want to sit here and look at me reading a PowerPoint presentation. This is the one, this is what I can tell you. One of the projects is in DOT, 2 of them are in DNR, 2 of them are Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, and 1 of them is statewide. I can send you, I can find out what they are specifically that were recommended. Those are the ones they said, our assessment said, when you start with those 6 projects and then work from there. I can send you a list after this that you can disseminate to the group.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, and then they give us the list of 17 investment projects after that and said, these are the ones to move to next. So I can give you the list of the 23 projects that our assessment said, if you're going to hit projects, these are the 23 to invest in. I'll send this to you.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'll share that with the group. Well, we are right at 9 o'clock. And Cheryl, are you still with us? She had a conflict. She was going to go to another event, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, this is Cheryl. I am. It was just so fascinating. So I stuck around. So thank you, Commissioner. We really do appreciate you're taking the time this morning, as well as, oops, start my video. Okay. As well as for joining us, as well as the work that you're doing. And to our group, if you have some suggestions for other topics, speakers that you'd like to see, please share them with Wineta or myself, and we will be glad to follow up and have others who are making the kinds of changes that many of us like to see happen. So thank you, Wineta, once again for doing a great job. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and Commissioner, thank you for the work you're doing. So with that, Wineta, any final words?
Yeah, Cheryl, I just put my email in the chat for everyone. Again, if you want to submit any ideas, we do invite everybody attending. We have a program coming up on February 24th with interim president of the University of Alaska statewide, Pat Pitney. She'll be doing a State of the University address. So we do invite you to participate in that as well. We have some other programs. So watch your email, and we'll be announcing other ones as well. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Good background, Aaron. Have you read all those? Okay. All right.